And to come out of this mess is not as simple as Mr. Trump believes. I mean, Trump, the idea that he's got to reform and to clean up the deep state is a good idea. And he had this idea already in 2016, I may add. Then he became president. And what did he do? Nothing. Nothing. He appointed to his cabinet deep state people. And now, if you look at the people that he's surrounding himself with, are these poor people? No. They're all billionaires. Do you think they want the stock market to go down? No. They will print money like there is no tomorrow, because they all depend in their wealth on asset prices going up in the US. And I talk here about the indices, Nasdaq and S&P, which are driven by the Magnificent Seven stocks and by the FANG and FANG-related stocks and semiconductors. In other words, a narrow group of stocks is driving the index up. That index, in my view, is topping out and will go down from here and possibly massively. The broad market, there are stocks that are depressed. Say, as an example, let's look at oil stocks. Oil stocks are relatively deep value stocks at the present time. They're less than 5% of the S&P 500. So this is a sector I would look at. When you look at foreign markets, I mean, I talked about Europe briefly. Mm-hmm. In Europe, the potential for an improvement is huge because it's been so bad for so long. So the valuations are reasonable. They're not ultra cheap like in 2009 or in 2003 or in the early 80s. But they're reasonably valued, especially relative to the US. They've been underperforming the US for the last 10 years. Similarly, you cannot find any analyst, you cannot find a strategist, and you cannot find the media that is positive about China and Hong Kong. Everything is negative. And because everything is negative about China, they also drag down the other Asian markets, and especially Indo-Chinese markets. So there is some value there, in my view. And Latin American markets are also relatively depressed. And if Milei succeeds, I think other countries will say, well, if this Milei succeeded and stocks go up and enrich the people of Argentina, then it's good that we do the same here in Colombia and in Brazil and in Peru and in Chile. So I think these markets have a large upside potential. And I mean, people look at NVIDIA. By the way, NVIDIA and Tesla are the largest holding of individual investors in America. The largest two companies that are extremely highly valued and whose future is highly uncertain. I'd say about the two most speculative stocks are the largest holding of the individual investor in America.
Beyond just stocks, Marc, I think this audience would also just love your perspective on, commodities, gold as well. What else are you kind of thinking about or looking at these days?
Well, I mean, you see, when I grew up, I remembered very well what the price level was in Switzerland. And when I go back to Switzerland now, I mean, I live in the north of Thailand, I can compare the prices that exist now with the prices that existed in the 50s and 60s. And then I look at the price of gold. The price of gold until 1971 was at $35 an ounce. And now it is around close to 2,700. So in my book, actually, gold has kept its purchasing power. You know, the price of bread is not up as much as the price of a gold of ounce, as an example. But the price of insurance premiums is up maybe more. So I think that people should own some precious metals. I like now platinum. I think platinum is relatively depressed. And in a bull market for precious metals, it can go up. But what I wanted to say about gold, I don't think that gold is that cheap. But then I look at the whole financial system. You see, when I started to work on Wall Street, the market capitalization of the US was just 25% of GDP.
Mm-hmm.
Now it is close to 200, about 170%.
Wow.
And the whole bond market in America was less than $1 trillion. It was around $900 billion. And now you know how big it is.
I don't even want to guess. Like trillions. Like
yes, I mean you can't imagine.
What is the number?
So, then I'm saying to myself, can we determine whether gold is expensive or cheap? According to some statistic, I could say that gold is not expensive. According to others, I can say it's expensive. But I can do the same for, say, I look at the price of soybeans, wheat, corn, sugar, and so forth. Is it expensive or cheap? It's more expensive than before, but it's still depressed, relatively speaking, compared to other prices that went up much more.
Mm-hmm.
The problem I want to explain to you and your viewers, the problem of monetary inflation is that it distorts everything. Everything becomes very murky. It's very difficult to say, is my house expensive or cheap? Because of monetary inflation. And then there is also the fiscal aspect. Suddenly the government in its ultimate wisdom, and we see its wisdom, how they handled the fires in Los Angeles. This is now a good example of government's competence. It's a complete disaster what they've done. Anyway, what I want to say is, in monetary inflationary times, when the government issues more and more money, it becomes very difficult to determine I'm wealthier or poorer. Because everybody soon will be a billionaire. It will be a billion like in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing to even think about, like that murkiness. Yeah, the distortions they're everywhere. Do you
look? When I went to school, and my father was a very successful orthopedic surgeon, he always says, "Oh, this is my client is a millionaire."
Mm-hmm.
$1 million was in the 50s a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
Nowadays, who gives a out to be a millionaire? Even $1 billion is not that much anymore.
That is just wild to even think about. Yeah. Wow.
The problem is people don't
changed.
they don't think about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. You have my wheels turning on that. Okay. You did mention just kind of the fiscal aspect of things. Maybe
Yes.
Maybe kind of looking at just the economy, like how much do you think it's been propped up by just like the fiscal side of things? Because this is a topic that's come up on this channel several times, but I would just love to hear more of your viewpoints. Are we also just seeing the distortions there, like just more broadly, like the health of the economy?
Well, you can do the following calculation. You could essentially measure GDP growth this year. As I said, it's already a figure that needs some adjustments about the rate of inflation. But let's take GDP growth of, say, 3%. And then we measure by how much has the government debt increased. If the government debt increases more than the 3%, then I could argue it's all been essentially financed by the government, this growth. And is this sustainable? Now, the modern theory, monetary theory economists, they will say, debts don't matter. The other day there was a clown on TV, a financial advisor, of course, and he said debts don't matter. Well, in the US, they began to matter now because the interest expenditures every year are over $1 trillion. And they're not going to come down for the foreseeable future because interest rates aren't going to come down meaningfully for the foreseeable future. So you end up in a situation where the government or the Fed will have to print money so that they can pay the interest on the debt. And then you are in a death spiral. A death spiral.
And I don't know how do you get out of a debt spiral once you reach that? What's the end game there?
Yeah. Hyperinflation. And that is what every government, every society has done in history. To tell people, you have to tighten your belts. We have to cut your pensions. Is politically in the democracy not acceptable. I wrote a report, why in democracies we'll always have more inflation. The other option is you go to people and say, look, we've been spending too much and we've been living over our standards of living. So what we have to do is to increase taxation. They do it to some extent already on homes. To maintain a house is becoming more expensive in the US because the insurance premiums are going up. And in some areas, like in Los Angeles now, the insurance company stopped insuring against fire because they were afraid that the government is so incompetent.
Yeah.
A lot of people lost their homes without an insurance. I don't insure my homes either. But this is a risk I can take in my life. And you can see I have a lot of books, a huge collection and so forth. I can't insure this anyway.